Hi, I'm Sue Roffey. I've been a teacher, parent, educational psychologist and academic and a writer, and I'm pretty passionate about what's happening in our schools today. Well, if you think about Bronfenbrenner's ecological model, you've got the socio-cultural issues at the top, and a lot of the things that are problematic in school, and most teachers will actually say that, are actually coming from the top. We're changing the Ofsted framework. They are going to be looking more seriously at wellbeing, so that's all really good news. There are some nice things happening. But in terms of a whole school, I think it's really important that school leaders take a serious role in thinking about what well-being means, not just sort of a piecemeal, doing a bit of this and a bit of that, but what well-being means across the whole school. There was a good movement many years ago called the Healthy Schools Initiative, which fell by the wayside, but that had a lot of similarities to what we're doing around well-being. If you don't actually have senior leadership with a vision that they communicate to the rest of their staff and their parents and community, then everything stays at a piecemeal level. So it needs, you can still do great things. I've got teachers who've come and learned how to run circles in their classes, and they're doing great stuff in their classes with those children. But when then the children move on, it's problematic. And I think that there's also a lot of really good stuff going on in primary schools, because they've got a bit more flexibility. They get to know the pupils and the parents better. But I think that we have a lot of problems in our secondary schools, and children are given a bit of agency in primary schools, and they get to secondary schools and it's regimented. And people talk a lot about discipline. Now, discipline for me is an imposed military term. We've got to be thinking differently about distressed children and what we can do about distressed children. There's a lot of talk around adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, and the trauma that children are actually experiencing. But it's about actually how children will actually behave differently in different contexts. And I think it's possible that schools can be a place of stability, of security, of care, if that is something that the senior management sees as central. And one of the things, talking to Maureen McKenna, talking about the fact that well-being is at the core of what they're doing, and surprise, surprise, academic outcomes improve. We know I was involved in the Australian Federal Scoping Study on approaches to student wellbeing, and in that study we found that if wellbeing is at the heart of a school's endeavours, everything else follows. You get more pro-social behaviour, you get better engagement, you get better mental health and resilience, you get better teacher well-being, because when you have a focus on social capital and the quality of relationships across the school, then that benefits everybody there. And of course, we also need to engage the parents and community in a positive way. I was at a school once where I was doing a bit of work with them, and as I was leaving the school, the deputy head teacher, whose responsibility was student wellbeing, said, in this school we have no suspensions, no detentions, no exclusions. They were doing everything around a restorative approach. And I said, well, what have you done about persuading parents that that's a good way forward? And he said, we're very clear about what we're doing and why we are doing it. And yes, there were a few mumbles and grumbles to start with, but now every parent knows that this is how the school runs and they accept it. And I also know that we've involved parents in running things with them around circles, so they can actually be engaged. Some schools I know have invited grandparents in at Grandparents' Day to be part of the circle, so they actually know what's happening. And teachers say how much they have learnt about emotional and social skills by doing this stuff. It's not rocket science, and the thing about it is that it's actually more complex than rocket science, because it's not happening as much as it needs to be happening. But when people are doing it, they're finding out that the benefits are just enormous for them, for their communities, and just to start building this so that, you know, rather than schools being in competition with each other or kids being in competition with each other, we actually start to promote a collaborative endeavour in which people are looking at how are we going to ensure that as many of our kids as possible flourish in their lives, authentically flourish, which means doesn't mean, you know, getting high grades and then getting a job in which they earn millions. You know, not everybody's going to do that, but they need to be flourishing in their families so they themselves become, you know, good parents. We're actually not just looking at kids now, we're looking at intergenerational change. So we have a society that benefits everybody, and at the moment we don't, and it's getting worse. So we need to be actually shifting from the very top what's actually happening in our education system.